And welcome back to Bengal Bites, the podcast where we satisfy your craving for Cincinnati Bengals news and analysis from a real, raw, unfiltered perspective. I'm your host, Derek. This is the Week 8 recap, where the Cincinnati Bengals went on the road to San Francisco to face the 49ers. The 49ers had been on an 11-game home winning streak. Brock Purdy, their starting quarterback, was playing in this game, and he had been on an 8-0, never lost a home game in his career coming into this game. The Bengals ended up winning this huge matchup 31-17. And we're going to break everything down, everything interesting that happened during the game, the stats, the aftermath, all that, and then take a look ahead towards the next game. But in this game, Joe Burrow went absolutely crazy. Maybe one of the best games of Joe Burrow's career, and we're going to break everything down. As Mike Florio would say on Pro Football Talk, the Bengals went into Levi's Stadium and stole a win out of the back pocket of the 49ers Blue Jeans. If you're brand new to this podcast, go back and check out episode 0 where I explain more about who I am and why I'm making this podcast. But basically, I'm a former college wide receiver, longtime fan of the Bengals, and lover of fine podcast. So I wanted to make a Bengals podcast that was unbiased, meaning not affiliated with the team, not on the Bengals payroll, so I can say my honest, unbiased, critical thoughts and opinions and analysis about the team. And also try not to be a super homer, because that's one of the other things that's really annoying if you're just always saying everything about how great every player on the team is. And if you listen to some of these podcasts, you would think every player on the Bengals should be on the Pro Bowl every year, because they say everybody is the best in the league at everything. So I try not to be overly homer. I try to be objective and realistic of my analysis of the team. Yeah, I mean, Joe Burrow, obviously best quarterback in the league. Jamar Chase, best wide receiver in the league. The other thing I wanted to eliminate in my podcast was ads. So there's no ads, no dynamic messages popping up anywhere, no gambling, anything like that. And I try to be mostly factually accurate and correct with most of the stuff. I try to do a little bit of research beforehand. So getting into episode 19, in this, like I said, one of Joe Burrow's best performances of his career, by far his best performance of this season, and getting back off that bye week, having that extra long time to rest. This is more like kind of what Joe Burrow anticipated himself looking like. He mentioned after the game how he had wanted to get his athleticism, his explosiveness, his acceleration, his mobility improved this offseason. That's something he really worked on with his training coaches and athletic trainers. He works out at Black Sheep Fitness and some other places, I'm sure. But he was talking about he really wanted to improve his athleticism, and he hadn't been able to show that off at all because he strained his calf right at the start of training camp. So he hadn't been able to use all that work and newfound explosiveness that he had. This is where it felt like we're finally seeing the Joe Burrow close to as 100% as he had been all year. And if this is the Joe Burrow that we're going to get the rest of the season, the Bengals' outlook is looking very good since they're already at a winning record, and Joe Burrow is playing at one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the league, if not number 1, after this performance. It's hard to know anybody else that's playing better than this. It's too bad that Burrow got off to the slow start. Otherwise, he would for sure be in MVP contention. Not that it matters. We're not even halfway through the season. But if Burrow had been playing this way every game up until now, he would definitely be far and away the MVP of the league. In this game, Joe Burrow had 3 touchdown passes, no interceptions, almost 300 yards passing, not quite. But he looked good in terms of running, calling his own number, quarterback draws, quarterback sneaks, scrambling outside the pocket. A lot of the plays in previous weeks where he would have just taken a sack or thrown the ball away and it would have ended incomplete. These plays were turning into completions. They were turning into Joe Burrow scrambling for first downs. He was picking up 10, 15, 20 yards. Plays that Joe Burrow was nowhere near making in the first few weeks of the season. So this was an incredible improvement in Joe Burrow's performance. The other thing that this did, and the reporters had asked about it, they kind of hinted at it, and the Bengals, talking about playing under center, because the Bengals had been playing exclusively or almost 99.9% 9% of the time out of the shotgun formation, meaning Joe Burrow standing about 5 yards behind the center and the center throwing the ball between his legs back to Joe Burrow and him catching it, instead of Joe Burrow going up and grabbing the handoff from underneath the center's legs. When you go under center and you do the traditional snap it up in between the legs where Joe Burrow's right directly behind the center, that can open up a lot of different things in the offense. And they didn't say they were going to do that, but they were like, yeah, we might try that out. And yeah, like first drive of the game when the Bengals had the ball, they came out and Joe Burrow was under center like half the plays. And that did a lot in terms of opening up the run game with Joe Mixon. They were able to get a lot of play action passes going, which they hadn't been able to do prior to this, barely at all, because Joe Burrow wasn't able to move. And that's part of the thing is he was able to manipulate the pocket and do fakes with his hands, like have the ball in his left hand, hand it off to Joe Mixon, and fake with his right hand to Jamar Chase going around on the fake sweep, and do it with good footwork and not able to worry about pulling his calf or tripping or putting extra stress on his calf. I think that's the reason why they had him out of shotgun so much, was just to limit how much he had to manipulate his calf and not have to re-aggravate it at all. But now he's at his full capacity. They can do whatever they want with him. That really opened up the playbook. And I got to tip my cap to the Bengals coaches on both sides, on every side. Offense, defense, special teams, all the coaches for the Bengals did an amazing job of scheming up and designing the plays, the schemes, everything, or almost everything. It wasn't perfect, obviously, but for the most part, their philosophy going into this game was well executed and very successful. Going into this game, one of the stories we talked about was whether or not Trent Williams, the left tackle for the 49ers, was going to be able to play. He had suffered an ankle injury, didn't practice all week. They said it was going to be a game time decision whether or not he would play. He did not play. But their quarterback, Brock Purdy, cleared concussion protocol on Saturday. He was able to suit up. A lot of people were surprised and questioning that decision, because if he reported concussion symptoms Tuesday morning, then he's playing in the game on Sunday afternoon. It doesn't give him a lot of time to recover and recuperate from what essentially a brain injury. You don't want to just rush back from that too quick, because if you suffer multiple brain injuries in a short amount of time, that could risk long-term damage. So fortunately for everyone, Brock Purdy made it through this game unscathed. It seemed like he didn't have any symptoms, report anything before or after this game. But the 49ers were already at a bit of a disadvantage just because there were no Trent Williams, no Deebo Samuel, their other wide receiver, who is kind of like a hybrid running back wide receiver type guy who plays a big role in their offense. So that's two pillars of the 49ers offense that was missing. And they're coming off of a short week where they played on Monday night. And then so they got basically 5.5 to 6 days of rest. And so this is, I'm not trying to make excuses for the 49ers, but it's just kind of a tough way because the Bengals had 14 days. They're coming off their bye, fully rested. Everybody's healthy, coming in playing a little bit banged up 49ers team. But like I said, 49ers had history of a huge home field advantage. They had won 11 straight, including the playoffs. And the 49ers were still favored by 4 points going into this game. Bengals won the toss, as they typically do. I don't know how it seems to work out that the Bengals win like almost every coin toss in the game. I think even though they had a streak of winning games, it was like 10 in a row. I don't know how many coin tosses they won. It must have been nearly 10, if not more, coin tosses in a row that they won going back to last year. But anyway, the Bengals, as they typically do, they won the toss and deferred to the second half because Zac Taylor loves to receive the second half kickoff. So they kicked off to start the game. The 49ers came out. They got a nice run on a zone read to the right with Christian McCaffrey on first down. After that, the drive stalled out. The Bengals were able to stop them for a short gain on 2nd and 2, brought up 3rd and 1, and they were stuffed by DJ Reader, basically pushed the 49ers center back into the backfield, stonewalled Christian McCaffrey before he could even get started, and then he was swallowed up and tackled from the outside by Cam Taylor-Britt. But right from the get-go, it was interesting. The Bengals, Lou Anarumo, he had schemed up this, special exotic defense. Apparently, the Minnesota Vikings had used a similar defense the previous game against the 49ers on Monday Night Football, where they used 5 defensive linemen against the 49ers' bigger personnel. I mentioned in the preview episode, the 49ers used the fullback and tight end or tight ends. And so they may go like 22 or 21 personnel, meaning having multiple running backs, multiple tight ends. So fewer wide receivers, especially because Deebo Samuel is still out. They were only using maybe 2 wide receiver sets more frequently than most teams in the NFL do, because it's such a passing league. The rules of the game are skewed for offenses to pass a lot. So they use more wide receivers than the 49ers typically do. But to counteract that, what the Bengals did was they took one of their defensive backs, Mike Hilton, number 21, who's normally starting, or they sometimes use a linebacker. If he were healthy, they might use Akeem Davis Gaither, number 59, but he's been hurt. He's still inactive, hasn't seen the field, and they're not going to use somebody like Joe Bacci or somebody like that. So instead of that, they put in an extra defensive lineman, and they went 5 wide across. They used basically, I guess they call it the bear front, where they had Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson were the 2 outside ends standing up, and they were kind of playing the flat area and containing the run. But then they also had 3 big defensive linemen up front. I think they started off with Zach Carter, DJ Reader, and BJ Hill, but they also used Cam Sample, Josh Tupou, and some others on the interior. But this was a much different scheme than we had seen with some other teams. And that's what good coaches do. They have to adapt to the opponent. They can't just stick with the same defense that they had been, because they had been playing like the Cardinals, who are a much more pass-happy team, and other teams like that where they had to play a lot more defensive backs. They're playing like 6 defensive backs, 4 cornerbacks, 2 safeties, 3 safeties sometimes, and a lot faster guys, stuff like that. In this game, they need more bulk, more mass up front to stop the run, because the 49ers start with the run and then they go with the play action passes from there. They're not really a passing team primarily. That's kind of the opposite philosophy from the Bengals. Bengals are like pass first and then run almost by accident, or if they have to. 49ers Mitch Wishnowsky punts a booming spiral into the wind, 60 yards to the Bengals' 7-yard line. Trenton Irwin, number 16, catches it, takes it back 8 yards to the Bengals' 15. That's where they start their first drive of the game with 12 and a half minutes left in the first quarter. Bengals are backed up to their 15, but that just makes it an extra long drive for Burrow and the boys to drive all the way down the field, 85 yards in 10 plays for a touchdown on their first drive. It's a mostly surgical drive. They start off with 2 quick passes to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to get things started. Then there is an incomplete pass to Drew Sample, as you would expect. I don't know what they were trying to do. They brought T and Jamar Chase off of the field to do this play action pass. So I was like, oh, here comes like some kind of special crazy play. And then it was just a pass to Drew Sample. I was like, why would you take your best receivers off the field and then do a play action pass to Drew Sample? Like, why? I didn't get it at all. Even in the best case scenario, Drew Sample is only going to get like maximum 5 yards on that play. There was nothing good was going to happen because they didn't really have anybody going deep. And Joe Burrow didn't even look for anybody. Like, that was the read. That was the play, was to go to Drew Sample. I didn't understand that at all. It didn't work how they retired that play. But then after this, they tried to go short, quick in to Jamar Chase. And this one was almost intercepted. Probably one of the few turnover-worthy plays by Joe Burrow in this game, and one of the few incomplete passes. So right off the bat, he had 2 incomplete passes in a row, but he only had 4 incomplete passes in the entire game. And they threw the ball quite a lot. So Joe Burrow only having 4 incomplete passes, 2 of them in the first 4 plays of the game. But after that rough start, it was not actually intercepted by number 26 for the 49ers, Isaiah Oliver. He made a good break on the ball. He was playing the inside receiver, Tyler Boyd, and then as soon as Joe Burrow got to the back of his drop and went to throw to Jamar Chase, Oliver just came out of nowhere, flew in front of the pass, and he would have probably had a pick six, but Jamar Chase came flying in and broke up the pass before the 49ers could intercept it. So that was a good play by Jamar Chase, just getting enough contact. Even though he wasn't going to catch it, he had to become the defensive back in that scenario, make sure that the other guy didn't catch it and pick it off. So luckily, on 3rd and 10, this was probably the best play of Joe Burrow's season, and one of the ones, if you want to put on a highlight tape of Joe Burrow's career, insane highlights, this play is going to be on the, got to be on the top 10 list in terms of he should have been sacked at least twice on this play. It was one of those classic Joe Burrow moves where he goes back, he didn't like what he saw in coverage, and Nick Bosa was getting pressure, and Eric Armstead, and the pressure was closing in from all angles. He was able to get away from one. He was wrapped up by Nick Bosa, number 97, and he was able to fight him off and got some help from Alex Kappa, the right guard, number 65. And all the offensive linemen did a good job of staying engaged, staying moving, staying blocking. And that's what the one thing that we had seen in previous years from Bengals offensive linemen was they'll block for like 2 or 3 seconds and then just kind of stand there and watch as Joe Burrow just like ran for his life. On this play, it worked because Joe Burrow was running for his life, but also the rest of the offensive line kept blocking, kept staying engaged with the guys and not just letting Joe Burrow do everything by himself. So they were getting 2 and 3 and second chance blocks on guys. And Burrow was able to escape somehow. They showed on the tape, you could see like both teams celebrated on this play at different times. The 49ers thought for sure they had Joe Burrow sacked. It's 3rd and 10. They're like, oh yes, we got Joe Burrow sacked. And all the 49ers are, and I even said in my living room while I was watching the game, I was like, oh, he's sacked. It's over. He's sacked. Here we go. Somehow he got away. It was like basically like Eli Manning on the helmet catch in the Super Bowl. It was like that kind of, he should be sacked, somehow gets away, throws it. It wasn't like all the way downfield. It was a like short out route to T. Higgins, just doing like a scramble drill to the right sideline. But T was able to catch it, extend the ball out, and get the first down. But just an amazing, remarkable individual effort on that play by Joe Burrow. It showed his calf wasn't bothering, no part of his body was bothering him, and that's what he was talking about, where he worked in the offseason of his strength, his athleticism. He had been so easy to sack in previous games because he couldn't move, he couldn't get away, he didn't really look as strong and explosive and athletic, and that just continued on throughout this game. So this was an amazing play. But as I mentioned, Burrow was going under center multiple times, 3 or 4 times at least on this opening drive. So that was a big change from any of the games we had seen before. Not as much shotgun. He was under center, handing off to Joe Mixon, so he was able to hit the holes quicker. And that Joe Mixon was getting like 10 yards, 11 yards. They were also doing play action passes, fake it to Joe Mixon from under center, come back, do a traditional drop back, and hit some of these guys. And the timing, the rhythm, it just seemed to work so much better when Joe Burrow was going under center. So being able to mix it up, have more variety, as Zac Taylor said after the game, he felt like he had a plethora of options available to him to call plays in this game. And later on, one of the other coaches, somebody over the headset, for some reason, nobody wants to take credit for one of the touchdowns, but Zac Taylor said he didn't even call one of the touchdown calls. It was somebody else. One of the other coaches said, hey, wouldn't it be a good time to run this play? So many things were firing on all cylinders in this game for the Bengals. But capping off the Bengals' first drive, they got down to 1st and goal after some passes to Chase, Higgins, Boyd, Mixon, and then they had Tyler Boyd lined up as the 3rd inside receiver, and they basically had the 2 outside receivers run clear out routes to the inside. Tyler Boyd had kind of an option to corner, or maybe kind of like a delayed fade route, but it's basically Tyler Boyd going to the back pylon of the end zone with a little bit of a delay, kind of act like he's could be going in or out, or just to give them a little bit more space in the timing so that he's not immediately sprinting to the pylon just to give some more uncertainty. But it was a great play, great throw by Joe Burrow, dropping it over the top of the defender. It wasn't terrible coverage, but just a great throw by Joe Burrow, not unlike some of the Geno Smith throws and Lamar Jackson throws we had seen against the Bengals defense. This time it was Joe Burrow throwing those touchdowns to Tyler Boyd, dropping it over him in the corner of the right end zone. Bengals go on top 7-0, and that's huge because, as we mentioned, they kicked off to start the first half. So they're scoring a touchdown first, getting out ahead, and they're going to get the ball to start the second half. And one of the things about the 49ers we mentioned is they like to run the ball. Well, if you're playing from behind, it's harder to run the ball. The 49ers like to get on top. If in the previous games they had been scoring a lot, getting up 20-0 on teams where they could just run the ball, and it was at their advantage. Now it's not so much at their advantage if they're playing from behind and they have to start throwing, which they don't really like to do as much. 49ers take over with about 8 minutes left to go in the first quarter, and they drive it down on their second drive for a touchdown. 8 plays, 75 yards, and about 5 minutes on the clock. The two biggest plays on this were on 3rd and 8, Brock Purdy was able to scramble, get out of the pocket, avoid the sack, and get about 16 yards to keep their drive alive, take it out to the 40-yard line. Then the next play on 1st and 10, they hit a deep pass to Brandon Ayuk on the right sideline where looked like maybe man-to-man coverage or some kind of zone where Cam Taylor-Britt started in coverage on him, and he got a free release inside and then broke it to the outside corner. Had a lot of separation, kind of found the soft spot in the zone. He did that a number of times, Brandon Ayuk, where he would run up, get separation, and just sit down in the soft spot of the zone, about 20 yards or 25 yards in the whole of the Bengals zone. Bengals were playing a lot of zone behind this 5-man front that they had going up. They were really committed to stopping the run and giving up the pass. And then when they got down, because they have they count on their goal line defense to bend but not break. But in this situation, they did break. They gave up the touchdown. 49ers completed their drive with a pass to George Kittle over the middle, Elijah Mitchell, then Christian McCaffrey scored a touchdown. This was Christian McCaffrey's touchdown in his 17th straight game, tying the NFL record for touchdowns in consecutive games, including the playoffs, from Lenny Brooks. If Christian McCaffrey gets a touchdown in his next game, he will break that record. That makes the score tied 7-7. After the touchdown, 49ers kick off, and they're kicking into the wind in this stadium. This is going to be a factor in the game. For whatever reason, it didn't seem to affect the passing game, but maybe just up higher in the air, the wind was stronger in the kicking game. It was a short kick, didn't get into the end zone for the touchback, so Travion Williams was able to field it at the Bengals 1, and he returned it 41 yards out to the Bengals 42. Big return. He wasn't able to break away and take it all the way for a touchdown, but still, that's great field position advantage for the Bengals' second drive. And they were able to take advantage of this and eventually score a touchdown. Now, Travion, if I had to make one critique, my college coach, if he were watching this tape, when Travion was going through on his kickoff return, he had the ball in his left hand initially. And then when he got about to the 25-yard line, he switched the ball to his right arm. So he went from left to right. And then he got tackled about 10 yards later. My coach would always used to tell us, if you're just out in the open field, never switch which hand you have the ball in for multiple reasons. Number one, because if you're running like that, you don't know where somebody is coming from behind, getting ready to hit you to dislodge the ball. So if you're running and you're in the middle of switching it to your other hand, somebody could hit you at the right time and pop the ball out that much easier. But secondly, if you're running it takes your brain that much more attention away from your legs, I guess. I mean, everybody can multitask, but at some point, if you're using your brain to focus on switching the ball from your left hand to your right hand, part of that brain power isn't going to your legs, telling them to run faster. So if he had just kept his concentration on running as fast as possible, and I don't know, maybe Travion is just slow, but he got caught pretty easily is what I'm trying to say here. If Travion were either A, faster, or B, put more focus on running fast and not switching the ball in his hands, maybe he could have got like to the 50. But either way, I'm being ultra picky. I understand that. I'm just saying Travion's not that fast. Anyway, the Bengals were able to pick up a 12-yard gain with Joe Mixon. Great running. He's been looking powerful, strong, breaking through tackles. And again, guys on defense do not like tackling Joe Mixon. He is a violent, punishing running back. We saw, it was later in the game, but 57, Drake Greenlaw took a wicked hit where he tried to come up and tackle Joe Mixon, and he was just laying on the ground, like shaking his head and shaking his arm and like just trying to shake the cobwebs out and shake it loose because he took a violent collision. But anyway, the Bengals, they were hitting passes over the middle, working in the zone, a lot of the same things that the 49ers did, honestly, to the Bengals. But the Bengals hit Tyler Boyd over the middle. There was one play where they tried to pull Cordell Volson, the left guard, number 67, from his position on the left side to block the right defensive end, Randy Gregory, number 5. He was a new acquisition in a trade. The 49ers traded for Randy Gregory with the Denver Broncos. He had formerly been with the Dallas Cowboys. High draft pick, had been suspended because of marijuana use. And since all that, they have like changed the rules, so now he wouldn't have been suspended as long. Anyway, he's like a really talented guy, kind of in the vein of a Josh Gordon for the Browns wide receiver who had a lot of talent but was suspended for drug abuse. Anyway, Randy Gregory, he sees Cordell Volson and just stuffs him completely, puts Cordell Volson flat on his butt, almost into Joe Burrow's legs. Luckily, Joe Burrow was able to get the pass off and not get crumpled up and steps through because he also had Orlando Brown getting pushed into him. Orlando Brown, he gave up pressure because he had Nick Bosa for the most part coming in on him, but it was like Joe Burrow had spent the entire bye week like watching tape on Nick Bosa. So even though he was getting pressure, Joe Burrow would just step out of it and avoid it and not get sacked. He only got sacked once in the first half, which is pretty good considering I think Nick Bosa had like 9 pressures in the first half, but he just couldn't convert them into sacks on Joe Burrow. Something that in the first few games of the season would have been a problem for the Bengals because Joe Burrow definitely would have been sacked. In this game, he's able to move, step out, left, right, up, anywhere he needs to go to get away from the sacks and get the throws off. I feel a little bit bad criticizing Cordell Volson because they did have a nice episode of his family story on YouTube, From the Jungles, a special Cordell Volson edition, going back to his hometown in Drake, North Dakota, and it was all about how he's from this little small town, everybody, rural farming neighborhood. And I guess it was interesting for people who don't know what small town life is like and have like only lived in the big city or something. But like, I'm well familiar with small towns. I was like, yep, that's what it's like. Not a lot going on around here. But, you know, he's a nice guy. But like Dave Lapham, the Bengals color commentator on the radio show, they were trying to ask him, like, what do you think it is about Cordell Volson? He's not getting very good grades from the graders. He's like, well, you know, the graders don't take into account. Sometimes you just try too hard, you know, because if you got beat on the last play, then you let your technique break down and you start, you know, try to block them too much and trying too hard, and that's when it can backfire on you. It's like, I don't think it's because he's trying too hard. I think it's because his body and muscles are not very strong, and that's why when he goes to block people, it looks like he's running straight into a brick wall and falling back on his back. So I don't think it's because he's trying too hard that he's getting like thrown backwards. But if you listen to Dave Lapham, he will tell you, hey, second-year player, he's a young guy, you got to give him time. On the other hand, as they alluded to in this thing, Cordell Volson played 6 years of college football at North Dakota State. So he was not even in a Division I, and he stayed there for 6 years. Like, he wasn't even good enough to come out of Division I AA early anyway. But I'm just saying, like, he's not going to improve that much. It's not like he's been holding back. He's already 25 years old. He's as big and as strong and as powerful as he's theoretically going to get. I don't know, within the realm of legality, I don't know what else Cordell Volson can realistically do to improve himself that much from where he is right now. So the fact that he's getting blown up already is not good. They may need to invest some draft picks or look outside in free agency in the years going forward. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. In this drive, the Bengals overcome Cordell Volson getting blown up, and they are able to score a touchdown because of the wit and the guile of the wise old center, Ted Karras, number 64. They get it down on the goal line or close to it, 2-yard line, right before the end of the first quarter. And Joe Burrow uses his cadence. He's been doing a lot in weeks recently. He's been doing a good job of drawing the other team off sides. And he gets Nick Bosa to jump off sides on this play. It's a free play. Actually, it's Javon Kinlaw, not Nick Bosa, but he jumped later. But Javon Kinlaw jumps off sides. As soon as he does, Ted Karras snaps the ball because he knows, okay, this guy's in the neutral zone, free play. Doesn't matter. Everybody just go. So Bengals get it. Joe Burrow takes it, scrambles around, goes to the right, sees Andre Iosivas with his man, Charvarius Ward, trying to guard him. He breaks to the middle, breaks back to the outside. Joe Burrow throws it to him along the sidelines. Touchdown. Great job by everyone on that play to get the touchdown, convert the penalty and the free play into the touchdown. Great job by Ted Karras snapping it, and the rest of the offensive line. Even Mitch Wilcox was out there blocking. I think maybe even Travion was out there getting some pass blocking in. Great job by Burrow staying alive. And I got to point out, it was the Halloween game, so they had some people dressed up in costumes. Burrow was out there in the orange and black Jordan Air Force Ones high tops. So he had switched to the Jordans recently, the Air Force Ones, and they were just the black and white. Now maybe for Halloween, he's busting out the orange and the black. They look pretty sweet, I'm not going to lie. But great job by Iosivas breaking away from Ward, getting open, getting separation in the end zone, and making a great hands catch away from his body and getting both feet inbounds. Great pro NFL catch. And that was his second touchdown. He got to dance with Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon, do a little bit more of that. So this was Andre Iosivas' third catch in his second touchdown in his career. We haven't seen too much of Andre Iosivas in the open field or using his downfield deep threat, like going deep for passes. Most of Iosivas' passes have been relatively short so far, but I think that will come. But it's good to see that he does have that ability to make those receiver get open plays, not just down the field. I kind of thought maybe he was just going to be kind of a deep ball Robbie Chosen or Robbie Anderson or whatever you want to call him, Chosen Anderson, whatever he's going by these days. But that kind of a deep pass, tall, lanky guy, a long strider, but maybe not necessarily the quickest guy. Andre Iosivas has shown he's got more than capable ability in terms of agility, quickness, short space, burst, all that kind of stuff to get separation from elite athletes. Like I said, he played in the Ivy League at Princeton, so I wasn't sure if he was going to be able to match up against these kind of guys like Charvarius Ward, but he was showing that he could get open, no doubt. To start the second quarter, Bengals are ahead 14-7. Now, because the Bengals scored their second touchdown on the last play of the first quarter, when they kicked off, they were kicking, it was the second quarter. It was the beginning of the second quarter, so they flipped the field direction around, meaning this time the Bengals were kicking into the wind. Evan McPherson's kick only went about 2 yards into the end zone, which was returnable. Normally he kicks it through the end zone. They don't even have a chance to bring it out, but they brought it out. They only got to the 15-yard line before, guess who? Andre Iosivas comes flying out of nowhere. Wide receiver out of Princeton makes the tackle. He just scored the touchdown. Now he's making the tackle on the kick return. So great play on offense, and then special teams by Andre Iosivas. Number 80. 1st and 10, the 49ers drop back for a pass. Brock Purdy steps in the pocket. He ends up scrambling, gets about 8 yards. But more importantly for the Bengals on this play, Trey Hendrickson goes down. He's clutching his ankle, and we see later that he got stepped on by one of the offensive linemen, and his ankle rolled over. Luckily, he was able to return to the game after getting it taped up. He only missed a few plays, but it was kind of a little bit stressful. You weren't sure, oh no, is this going to be a serious injury? Because Trey Hendrickson has been basically the Bengals' best player on defense, and losing him would have been a huge loss. But luckily, he looks like he's going to be fine, maybe a little bit sore, but no long-term injury. Later on the drive, 49ers end up going 3 and out. They ended up losing yards on 2nd down, brought up 3rd and 6, and then the pass over the middle got deflected at the line of scrimmage by B.J. Hill. Logan Wilson almost looked like he had a chance to intercept it, but it came down incomplete. So that's the 2nd punt already. 49ers go 3 and out again, and it's a 62-yard punt with the win. It goes over Trenton Irwin's head. I don't know if he kind of misjudged it a little bit, but instead of being able to come up and catch it over his head, 62 yards on the roll, a little bit worse field position than the Bengals would have liked. Like I said, even though Trey Hendrickson was not going up against Trent Williams in this game, he was going against Jalen Moore. I thought Jalen Moore did a respectable job for most of the game, holding Trey Hendrickson back. And maybe, Trey Hendrickson's ankle was a little bit balky after this, so he wasn't quite as explosive as he normally would have been. But I didn't notice, Trey Hendrickson getting in huge amounts of pressure as he, against the Rams when he was just going crazy. Bengals took over with about 13 and a half minutes left to go in the second quarter from their own 20-yard line. They had a short pass to Irv Smith for about 4 yards, short run with Joe Mixon up the middle for 4 yards. Then they had a wide receiver screen or a bubble screen to Jamar Chase to the right sideline. Picked up about 7 yards where Jamar Chase broke out of the initial tackle, was able to pick up some more yards going forward. And then there was an additional 15-yard penalty because Oliver, number 26 for San Francisco, made helmet-to-helmet contact with the crown of his helmet. It was hard to say whether it was intentional or just incidental that he went in and kind of lowered his head into Jamar Chase. But either way, helmet to helmet into Chase, that's an additional 15-yard penalty, moving the ball straight to the 50-yard line already. Then we saw Joe Burrow get out of a sack. It looked like he was about to get sacked by Nick Bosa on the pressure, but he was able to get 1 yard, so not lose anything, not a sack. Then later in the drive, we saw Joe Burrow on 3rd and 9. He looked like he checked to a quarterback design draw play. He looked at the defense as they were lining up. He went up and called the audible because he saw nobody was over the middle of the field. There was only 4 defensive linemen rushing, and they had 5 wide receivers. Everybody was split out to the wide. So everybody on the 49ers defense was out guarding man-to-man coverage, basically split out way out from the middle of the field. And that gave Joe Burrow plenty of space. So as soon as they snapped the ball to him, he took half a step like he was going to fake a pass, and then immediately went forward up through the middle of the defense, fake like he was going to go to the right, broke to the left to avoid the safety coming in so he could pick up just enough yards to gain the first down. It was 3rd and 9, and he got 10 yards. Perfect call by Joe Burrow, being able to identify that the defense is going to be weak and susceptible to the quarterback draw in that situation, knowing the right time to call it for himself, calling his own number, and being physically able to do that. In previous weeks, he couldn't have called his own number because he just knew that he couldn't do that. But now he's got the confidence, he's got the swagger back, he's getting up, he's pointing, first down, let's go. And that's what you want to see, as a Burrow fanatic. That's what we love. We love to see that enthusiasm, that hype, because that gets the crowd hyped up. That gets Joe Burrow's teammates hyped up. And we saw after the game, Jamar Chase, they're asking him on that 3rd and 10 play. I forgot to mention this. The 3rd and 10 play where he was scrambling, avoiding the sacks, throwing it to T. Higgins. At the very end of that, Fred Warner, the All-Pro, number 54, he was coming flying in, a totally legal hit, no roughing the passer, but as soon as Joe Burrow released that ball, he was getting drilled right in the chest from Fred Warner. And after the game, they were like, Jamar Chase, you were watching that play. What did you think about that when you saw Joe Burrow? Because he just popped up, like, no big deal. I was watching that, and I was like, oh, no, this is going to be like Joe Burrow's going to be down. He's going to be dead. What's going to happen to Joe Burrow? They were like, Jamar, what do you think about that? He was like, yeah, he's a tough motherfucker. Like, what can you say? And absolutely, that is 100% true. That's the best way to describe Joe Burrow. That's what we saw in this game, and he was back. It was beautiful. Right after Burrow picks up the first down, they did a designed late release to Irv Smith where he lined up on the left wing and he came inside like he was going to pass block, and then he did a late release out to the left side, got a decent gain, stepped out of like one tackle, then got tackled for a first down. It was an 11-yard gain for Irv Smith Jr., number 81 for the Bengals. And after that play, Jim Nantz commented that was the longest catch of the season for a tight end, and it was 11 yards. It was like, wow, this is week 8, and the longest catch is only 11 yards. So that just goes to show how little production the Bengals have been getting from the tight end position so far this season. Later in this drive, the Bengals kind of stalled out. They tried to run with Joe Mixon a couple times, didn't really get too far. Some good plays by Randy Gregory and Isaiah Oliver by the 49ers defense. And then finally, Joe Burrow's luck kind of ran out. The offensive line had been holding up enough, but finally Joe Burrow wasn't able to escape. He gets sacked on 3rd and 7 to Eric Armstead for the 49ers, and that moves the Bengals back, makes this field goal attempt on 4th and 14 that much more difficult for Evan McPherson, the Bengals kicker. And again, they're going into the wind at this point in the second quarter, and it's a 50-yard field goal into the wind, and it looks like it's going a little bit right to left with the flags at the top of the goalpost. But unfortunately, Evan McPherson pushes it wide right. It looked like it started right, and even the wind and even McPherson's natural hook from right to left that he normally gets wasn't enough to bring the ball back inside the uprights. The score stays tied at Bengals 14, San Francisco 7, with 7 minutes left to go in the first half. After the missed field goal by the Bengals, 49ers take over at their own 40-yard line, and it seems like about this time, somewhere midway through the second quarter, that the 49ers decide to switch it up, and the Bengals with their 5-man big personnel is being a little bit too effective. So the 49ers, maybe it's because they're down or whatever, they switch it up and go more 11 personnel with more 3 wide receivers, Ray McLeod, Juwan Jennings, Brandon Ayuk, instead of their heavier tight ends and running backs and fullbacks. But this brought Mike Hilton into the game more often, and Mike Hilton was also making plays. He identified the run when he got on the field on this drive very quickly and was able to stop Elijah Mitchell for a short gain with Sam Hubbard. He also identified the pass quickly where it was 3rd and long. The 49ers ended up getting a holding penalty on a run where Mike Hilton was he was in position to make a tackle, but they held him, so he influenced that play as Mike Hilton influenced that play as well. Then on the next play, Mike Hilton was playing zone defense. Brock Purdy dropped back. It was 2nd and 19. He threw it to Christian McCaffrey. Mike Hilton comes up and makes the tackle. That makes 3 plays in a very short amount of time where Mike Hilton is making his presence known. And that's good because Mike Hilton's had kind of an up and down season. We saw Mike Hilton got the interception, but he's also been giving up some yardage in the run game. On 3rd and 14, Brock Purdy tries to scramble out of the backfield again. He gets close. He gets 10 of the 14 yards that they need, but Jordan Battle is able to make a good tackle, not let Brock Purdy get away and get that first down. 49ers have to settle for a field goal instead of a touchdown. They don't go for it because it's 4th and 4, and it's still early in the game. Too risky probably to consider going for it at that point. They're on the 18-yard line, not close enough to the end zone really to want to risk it. So they kick the field goal from 36 yards away. Jake Moody makes it. It's easy enough for Jake Moody to make a 36-yard field goal. So that makes the score Bengals 14, 49ers 10 with 2 minutes, 48 seconds left to go in the second quarter. 49ers kick off with the win this time, so it's a touchback. Bengals take over from their own 25. And this is another surgical drive all the way down the field. Lots of passes, short passes to T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Tyler Boyd, 9 yards, 8 yards. They were never getting to third down at all on this drive. They had 9 plays, no third downs, because they would just keep getting first downs after 1 or 2 plays. It would just be second down and they would get another first down. But when they get close to the goal line, it's 1st and goal on the 3. They try another pass out to the right to Irv Smith, and he gets stopped in the backfield for a loss of a yard. And on top of that, he gets hit and fumbles. The 49ers pick it up. They blow the whistle so they don't get to recover it as far as they would have if they didn't blow the whistle. I don't know why the referees are so quick to blow the whistle if they see the ball out rolling around on the ground. But it could have been an easy field goal, if not a touchdown going into halftime for the Bengals. Instead, they come away with 0 points, which was a big letdown for the Bengals. Obviously, Irv Smith was disappointed. He had already had a couple catches previously in this game, and he was trying to get things going, trying to get involved in the offense like he wanted to be as the starting tight end, like he should be, really. But he hasn't been much of a receiving threat. He hasn't really looked that quick or athletic with the ball in his hands when he has actually caught it. He hasn't got too much yak. And unfortunately, it was just kind of one of those things. He was trying to do too much, like Dave Lapham would say. Maybe he was trying to do too much, trying to spin and exert himself and put the ball in harm's way, got poked out. That led to the 49ers getting the ball back. They had a couple of plays, deep pass to George Kittle. One ball bounced off of Brandon Ayuk's face over the middle of the field. So they couldn't really do anything. They only had like 30 seconds. Time ran out, but it was just kind of like getting some more yardage to pad the stats. But at halftime, they pointed out how the Bengals had been doing much better on offense than they had previously at any point in the season. Tony Romo had all these statistics queued up going into the game about how bad the Bengals had been on offense and how they had by far the fewest explosive plays over 15 yards in the NFL, and like the next closest team basically had double the amount of explosive plays that the Bengals had, and how Christian McCaffrey, the running back, number 23 for the 49ers, how he himself alone had more touchdowns than the entire Bengals offense coming into this game. And all those things were getting disproven. And one of the interesting statistics that they had was Joe Burrow had a career high in completions in a row. He, going into halftime, had 19 completions in a row. Not a lot of deep passes, no deep bombs, but like I said, these short passes underneath, very efficient, moving the chains. That's all you want. Is if you're getting first downs every 2 plays, that's the same thing as throwing, a deep bomb. That being said, there was one of these that was especially risky. There was the one play early in the game where Joe Burrow looked like it could have been intercepted. Then right before halftime, he completed a pass to Tyler Boyd, number 83, over the middle, where Tyler Boyd was double covered, very tight window where the linebacker was underneath, the safety was over the top. Joe Burrow fit it in right in between this sandwich of defenders into Tyler Boyd. But if you go back and look at the wide angle, on the outside, Jamar Chase and Trenton Irwin are one-on-one, and they're both standing completely wide open with nobody within 5 yards of them. So it was an incredible throw and accurate precision pass by Joe Burrow. But at the same time, it's like, it would have been a lot easier to just throw one of those other guys that was wide open. You didn't have to throw it into double coverage like that. But hey, it worked. After halftime, the Bengals weren't able to get the double whammy like Zac Taylor likes to do, score before halftime and get the score after halftime. But they did get a field goal on this first drive of the second half. They took over, and Burrow's streak immediately came to an end. He immediately threw an incomplete pass, back shoulder fade to T. Higgins along the right sideline with number 7 for the 49ers, cornerback Travarius Ward guarding him. The very next play, they basically ran the exact same play, except instead of T. Higgins, it was number 1, Jamar Chase, going up against Ward on the right sideline. Back shoulder fade. This time they get pass interference on Ward. Automatic first down. And it doesn't seem like this is the first time this season where we've seen T. Higgins fail on some kind of a play, and then the next play they'll just have Jamar Chase run the exact same play and it'll be successful. I seem to remember a play against the Titans in Tennessee where T. Higgins tried to run an out. He dropped it on the sidelines. The next play, they had Jamar Chase line up the same spot, run the same route. He caught it. So it's just kind of like, they're like, man, that would work if it was Jamar instead of T. Okay, just do the same thing, but T, switch it up with Jamar. That got it out to about the Bengals' 40-yard line after that pass interference penalty. The biggest play on this drive was 2nd and 9. Burrow scrambles. It's man coverage underneath with 2 high safeties. But they're really trying to stop the pass. But the issue with that from a defensive perspective is they're only rushing 4 defensive linemen. If none of those defensive linemen get home and sack Burrow in the backfield, there's nobody out in the open field in the middle of the field to tackle Joe Burrow, and that's what happens. He goes back, he waits for all the man coverage to clear out of the middle of the field, and he's just got a wide open lane where he just runs past everybody for 20 yards before they're able to tackle him, and he dives forward. He never slides in this game. He's always diving forward, getting extra yards, even when this guy's coming in making like hits on him late and stuff, and he gets up and he's slapping his helmet, and it reminds me of the wide receiver for the Panthers a long time ago, Steve Smith Sr., he played for the Panthers and then the Ravens, and he was, like this small, probably one of the smallest guys out in the field, but he had heart, he had grit, he had intensity, and when he would make a big catch and run, and he would usually get a lot of yak, and they would try to tackle him, he was breaking tackles, he would finally go down, and he would get up, he would be punching himself and slapping himself in the helmet like, I'm so crazy, you can't even hold me back, I'm going to punch myself in the helmet, and I don't even care. That's what Joe Burrow was doing. That's the intensity, the fire that you want to see out of a football player. As JT O'Sullivan would say on his YouTube channel, he was like, that's the fire you want to see out of a real football player, not just some pocket passer who wants to stand back there. He's not trying to avoid the contact. He wants to embrace the physicality of the game of football. He has accepted that. And Zac Taylor, I'm sure, he would not get so physical, maybe back it off a little bit. That's how he got his trachea or his esophagus bruised that one time. He got his throat punched or something. So you got to watch out a little bit more, Joe Burrow. We want to keep you upright, healthy the entire season. Maybe not so much crazy diving straight into the ground. There was one play I thought he got his head slammed from Nick Bosa because he was diving forward and he went sideways into the turf with his head. But every time he just pops up, he looks like he's fine. And hopefully that's what he just does every time. This drive also stalls out with another sack. The 49ers defensive line starting to pick it up a little bit. Bengals had held them at bay for the most part, and Nick Bosa, even though he was getting pressure, they weren't getting sacks. And it's pretty much right on cue as Jim Nantz is talking about how they weren't able to get to Burrow. Only 1 sack. Immediately, Eric Armstead straight up the middle, past Alex Kappa, the right guard, and sacks Joe Burrow for a 7-yard loss. That makes it 3rd and 16. They get a little bit back with a pass over the middle to Jamar Chase, but they have to settle for a 56-yard Evan McPherson field goal. But when you look at the flags at the top of the goalpost, he had the wind to his back, and he kicked it straight down the middle with ease. It probably would have been good for a 65 or something like that. Wind to his back, straight down the middle, no problem. So that makes it 17-10 Bengals. One small note here is in the second half, as the day is getting later, the sun is getting lower in the sky, there's a big shadow that's cast across, splitting the field pretty much. At some point, it seems like it's splitting the field directly through the middle. The center of the field, like on the left half, it'll be all completely light, and then on the right half, it was all completely in the shade. When you're watching on TV, it's especially hard to see because the camera, the exposure, from the lens, it can't get everything in the correct exposure. Something is going to be out of exposure. So something was either too bright or too dim. The whole second half, it made it not that good to watch. Like everybody at the bottom of the field was all like too shady and dark, and everything was blown out the top. It was just like not an ideal experience. Kind of annoying. If I had to watch a lot of games for the 49ers, like at that time of the day, it would be pretty annoying. 49ers take over on their first drive of the second half. They immediately get hit with a holding penalty. That puts them in 1st and 20. They get only a couple yards back on second down. But then 2nd and 18, Brock Purdy hits an amazing pass to George Kittle up the left seam where it was over the linebacker, but in front of Nick Scott, the safety for the Bengals, number 33. He was playing George Kittle on the left hash, and it was too far away for the other safety, Dax Hill, to get over from the right hash. Purdy, the quarterback for the 49ers, just dropped it in perfectly with the right touch, perfect timing. It hit George Kittle exactly on the upfield shoulder so that the Bengals defender had no opportunity to make any kind of a defensive play on it. This was really an impressive throw. I don't want to say it was more or less impressive than Joe Burrow because later in the game, Joe Burrow had a pretty impressive throw himself. But this one was right up there with one of the top throws you're going to see from any quarterback in the league in the NFL. Just in the velocity, like he just hurt his elbow in the playoffs last year. So I wasn't sure coming off an injury whether he was going to still have that same velocity and be able to whip it in there. But this, he had showed no signs of any previous injury, just perfect pass. That picks up 32 yards for the 49ers, and George Kittle continues to have a big day. But later in this same drive, they had a couple short plays, brought up 3rd and 7 at their 48. George Kittle drops the pass. He runs a good route. He gets open. Ball hits him right in the hands, goes through. 49ers have to punt. There are a couple drops by Kittle in this game. He made a ton of big plays. It was his season high in receiving yards by far. But even after the game, he admitted nobody played the perfect game, including himself. He had 3 or 4 plays that he needed to have back. There was one where I saw him trying to block Jermaine Pratt out on the edge, and Jermaine Pratt stood George Kittle up and forced a no gain. I know George Kittle, as great as he is, expects himself to make those plays in those situations. On this same 49ers drive, Brock Purdy almost threw an interception to Cam Taylor-Britt where DJ Reader was getting pressure again. DJ Reader's been turning it on the last few weeks. He wasn't getting a lot of pressure early. I'm not sure what was going on. Maybe he was battling some kind of an injury that he just didn't let on about. But recently, he's been coming on, getting pressure. Maybe they've been moving around in different positions, but he got in on Brock Purdy. And the thing about Brock Purdy is when he's in the face of pressure, he has a kind of a natural tendency to fade away when he's throwing it. And I mean, that would be natural for anybody. If DJ Reader, a big 300-pound guy, is coming in, getting ready to dive at me and throw all his weight into me, I would probably want to fade away a little bit out of the way. So I don't blame Brock Purdy. But what happens is, that makes his passes a little bit inaccurate. Luckily for the 49ers, Brock Purdy's pass was so inaccurate, nobody was able to catch it. But that was just one of the things throughout the game is Brock Purdy, sometimes he would get away with it. He was able to get enough on the pass to get it to his receivers down the field. But just something to watch. I'm sure defensive coordinators are going to try to make him uncomfortable because they're going to see that tendency to pull away when they get in his face. The Bengals received the punt with about 8 minutes left to go in the third quarter. They get a short run from Joe Mixon, brings up 2nd and 5. They line up Ja'Marr Chase in the backfield next to Joe Burrow. They've got Joe Mixon on Joe Burrow's left side, Ja'Marr Chase on Joe Burrow's right side. Joe Mixon goes in motion, or at the snap, he goes out to the left, I guess, to draw the defense. But then they hand the ball off to Ja'Marr Chase out of the backfield, and it's just a run play, a sweep with Ja'Marr Chase around the right side. But the 49ers have it well covered. They've got guys standing out on the right. Isaiah Oliver, number 26, the nickel cornerback, just shoots upfield and tackles Ja'Marr Chase for an 8-yard loss. I went back and watched this. I'm not sure what the plan was supposed to be from the Bengals. They didn't have anybody out blocking for Ja'Marr Chase, and there was a lot of 49ers defenders out there. It looked like maybe Ted Karras was supposed to pull around to the right and get out in front, but Irv Smith missed his block on number 95, Jackson, who came in and blew up Alex Kappa all the way into the backfield, and that prevented Ted Karras from getting out and getting anything on his block. Maybe Karras and Kappa were supposed to lead out in front of Ja'Marr Chase, but it ended up being nobody in front of Ja'Marr Chase and just Ja'Marr Chase against 3 other guys. You might expect Ja'Marr Chase to break out of the tackle from one guy, but you can't expect Ja'Marr Chase to just take a handoff and go up against 3 guys by himself. So whatever the plan was on that one, the Bengals need to redesign it a little bit or put it back into the stash of plays that did not work. And like Tony Romo was saying, it's not really a misdirection to put Ja'Marr Chase directly next to Joe Burrow in the backfield because everybody's looking at Joe Burrow. They see, oh, Ja'Marr Chase, their best player, is standing right next to Joe Burrow. We're all looking at him. Oh, he just handed it off to him. Let's all go tackle him. So they needed a little bit, maybe like a Ja'Marr Chase, flea flicker, pass, something. Don't just hand it off to Ja'Marr Chase without any kind of other tricks. Bengals ended up punting on 4th and 2 because they tried to pick up the first. They set up a screen to Irv Smith Jr., number 81, Bengals tight end, and it got 11 yards, but not enough, so they had to settle for a punt. 49-yard punt, fair catch. And at this point, I can hear somebody on the sidelines yelling. And I was like, what is it? Because they have these, boom mics or these big dish. You see these people holding these big plastic round dishes. They're microphones that catch all the sound coming off the field and, give more ambiance to the television broadcast. And I can hear somebody yelling like, I'm like, what is this crazy person screaming about? So I went back and I watched the replay to try to figure out what was going on in this play. And it was the Bengals special teams coach, Darren Simmons, former punter from Kansas. And he was yelling, he was saying Tice at the end of it because he was upset and yelling at Tyson Anderson, number 26, the safety from Toledo. He's the guy who had 2 interceptions in one preseason game, had a pick 6. He sat out all of last year because he had a hamstring injury. Anyway, Darren Simmons was yelling at him. He was saying, push him into him, because he was running down the field. And even though the 49ers returner waved his hand for a fair catch, if Tyson Anderson from the Bengals had the wherewithal to realize what was going on, he could have pushed the other 49er into the returner, and it might have bounced off of one of them by disrupting the returner. That's a legal play. It's not legal if you hit him in the back like Tyson Anderson did on one of the previous games. But if he, from the front, pushed this guy into the returner, that could create a turnover. It could bounce off one of them, and the Bengals could recover it. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But that was just interesting to see in real time a coach is seeing the ball in the air and yelling at the guy on the field, telling him what to do. It didn't work. He didn't listen, because obviously somebody in that situation can't like hear the coach from the sideline and, oh yeah, I'm going to push this guy. No, didn't work. Tyson Anderson actually got blocked himself and got like blocked onto the ground. But it was just funny to see Darren Simmons like going crazy out there on the sidelines. That's why he's been a special teams coach in the league for so long, is because he's so passionate about coaching. He loves what's going on and loves communicating. He's, getting up in the face of his players as they're coming off the field. And that was one of the things people were bringing up in contrast to the 49ers defensive coordinator, Steve Wilks. They show him up in the booth, kind of like Brian Callahan, the Bengals offensive coordinator. He's up in the booth. But Zac Taylor, the play caller, is actually down on the sidelines. This isn't, the fact that Steve Wilks sits up in the booth isn't totally unheard of. Like, I can think just off the top of my head, Dan Quinn for the Dallas Cowboys is one of the most noteworthy defensive coordinators in the league, and he's up in the booth all the time. Nobody has a problem with that. But the 49ers, now that they're losing games, people are looking for somebody to blame. Steve Wilks is this new guy in town, and all of a sudden they're blaming the defense, and they're saying, well, Steve Wilks is sitting up in the press box calling the plays. He should be on the sidelines like their previous defensive coordinators, Robert Saleh and DeMeco Ryans, who are now head coaches with other teams. They're like, well, those guys were on the sidelines, and Steve Wilks should be on the sidelines calling the plays. I don't know. I mean, there's pros and cons to both of them. I think Steve Wilks has been a coach at so many levels for so many years. He knows the way that he's going to be most effective as a coach and as a defensive play caller. So if he feels like he's going to be better up in the booth, I would trust him. I wouldn't, as Kyle Shanahan, the head coach, I wouldn't tell Steve Wilks, you must come down onto the sideline and call the plays and get out of the press box. If Steve Wilks is like, yeah, I'm going to be more effective. But who knows? If the players are like, yeah, I feel like I'm lost out there with somebody on the sidelines telling me exactly what I need to do, maybe that would be more effective. We'll have to see what the 49ers do. One thing that was interesting on the trade deadline day, we saw the 49ers real quick. 49ers made a trade. They got Chase Young, the former number 3 overall pick, defensive end from Ohio State. They traded for him for a compensatory third-round pick. Not a first, not a second. Chase Young for a third-round pick, late third-round pick, to the 49ers. I mentioned they got Randy Gregory. They've already got Nick Bosa. The 49ers are loading up their defensive line to battle out against the Eagles and all the other tough competition they have to go through coming forward this season. But after the Bengals punt, the 49ers take over at their 24 with about 6 minutes left to go in the third quarter. They complete 3 play-action passes in a row. One to Brandon Ayuk for 15 yards on the left sideline, kind of a deep out. Then 2 in a row to George Kittle over the middle, and then short to the right. They picked up another 9 yards with 2 runs to Christian McCaffrey that brought up 3rd and 1. They did a direct snap to the fullback, number 44, Kyle Juszczyk, up the middle. And it looked like the Bengals were able to stop them. They had their big guys out there. They had Josh Tupou, DJ Reader, BJ Hill out there. And it looked like they had stopped him, but Kyle Juszczyk kept going, driving his feet and kind of rolling over the top of people. And they came back and said it actually was a first down for the 49ers. Kept the drive alive. 49ers got it down to the 8 after a Brock Purdy scramble picked up another first down, and Cam Taylor-Britt was kind of shaken up on this play. Looked like he may have twisted his ankle a little bit. He was able to come back and finish out the game. But on 1st and goal, 49ers, after the game, it was a weird-looking play right from the start. Something wasn't right. They tried to do, it looked like a handoff that missed, and then maybe a shovel pass that wasn't a shovel pass. Then Brock Purdy was scrambling out to his right, and he tried to throw it to the running back out of the backfield, but Jermaine Pratt was running after him, swatted it with his left hand, like right in front of Brock Purdy's face, tipped Jermaine Pratt, number 57, the linebacker for the Bengals, tipped it to himself, caught it, almost was able to stay in bounds. I guess Brock Purdy got him just enough, and Jermaine Pratt wasn't able to tiptoe and stay in bounds. If he could have stayed in bounds, he could have scored a touchdown. You know what I say, stay in bounds, score touchdowns. Jermaine Pratt couldn't do it. Joe Burrow, after the game, said he was giving Jermaine Pratt a hard time, yeah, good interception, stay in bounds next time. Anyway, it was a weird play. They said the 49ers coach Kyle Shanahan said it was supposed to be a handoff, and if you don't hand it off, then you definitely can't throw it, because the 49ers offensive linemen were all downfield like it was a run block. They were trying to block, so you can't have your offensive lineman running downfield. That's a penalty if you pass it. Brock Purdy admitted it was a bad decision on his part after the game, but I don't know why he wasn't able to hand the ball off. Maybe it was a bad snap or something like that. But then he's got to know that he can't try to throw the ball if it's supposed to be a running play. Bad play, broken play, made even worse with the interception. It wouldn't have mattered. I mean, it definitely would have mattered, but it wouldn't have counted. Even if he had tried to complete the pass, it would have been a penalty for illegal man downfield. It wouldn't have worked anyway. Bad situation became worse for the 49ers. Bengals are able to take over around their 20-yard line. First play, Joe Burrow completes a deep pass, 33 yards to T. Higgins on a play action over the middle, deep in. It's kind of like a double post routes. T. Higgins is running the outside post. He comes underneath, catches it. Good protection by the offensive line. That 33-yard completion is the longest pass Burrow completed all day, and that was the final play of the third quarter. Bengals head into the fourth quarter with the lead and the ball, 17-10. Unfortunately, the next play after this deep pass, Joe Burrow gets sacked by half a sack between Clelin Ferrell and Nick Bosa. They're able to get home, and that brings up 2nd and 13. They pick up 6 with Joe Mixon, but then they try to pick up another first down with a pass to Jamar Chase. It looks close to being a completion and then a fumble, and it looks like the 49ers have picked it up and run it back to the 15-yard line or something, but they review it. They say that the pass was actually incomplete. They say Jamar Chase, the Bengals wide receiver, did not have it in his hands for long enough to be considered a completed catch. So it wasn't a fumble. That means the ball does not go over to the 49ers on a fumble. And really, that gave the Bengals an opportunity to punt it to get a little bit better field position. Unfortunately, they punted it from the 49ers' 45-yard line. It was 4th and 7, too long for a field goal, especially because they're going into the wind in the fourth quarter. But the punt lands at about the 10-yard line, and it takes a hard hop forward towards the end zone. And Andre Iosivas, number 80, wide receiver from Princeton, he's standing at the 5-yard line. He's in between the ball and the end zone. But unfortunately, when the ball comes down, it takes such a fast, hard hop up. It hits and ricochets off of Iosivas' hands up into the air and over his head into the end zone for a touchback. So it's a 45-yard punt, net of only 25. Not what the Bengals were hoping for, but still it's better than a fumble in terms of where the 49ers take over. And they take over at their own 20-yard line, 13 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. First play, Brock Purdy makes a terrible decision again. The last play, they just left the field on. They were about to go in and score some points. They had it down, threw an interception on a busted play to Jermaine Pratt. This time, Brock Purdy makes a terrible decision, misreads Logan Wilson, the linebacker for the Bengals, number 55, over the middle. For some reason, Brock Purdy thought he was going to go to the left and not play the middle of the field, but Logan Wilson just kind of turned his hips just for like one step and then squared back up and then turned to the left to go towards the center of the field where the route was going. stepped right in front of the pass from Purdy, intercepted it. Wilson ran it back to about the 17-yard line. And they asked Kyle Shanahan after the game, was this the intended design? Because when you look at it, the 49ers had two wide receivers running basically right next to each other. They had number 15, Juwan Jennings, and number 11, Brandon Ayuk, almost where they could run holding hands with each other. And they were like, was that? Because it didn't look right. You never want to have two wide receivers running side by side because one defender can basically guard both of them. You want to kind of have some separation between the guys. And Kyle Shanahan said that that was the play that they were supposed to run, and that's how they were supposed to run it. And they had run that play like 3 other times in the game. He acted like, what? That's totally normal. Like, didn't you guys see that? We ran that play like the whole game. I mean, we ran it like 3 other times. I don't know what you mean. It was totally normal. I didn't see it. I went back and watched. I didn't see them running with two guys right next to each other on any other plays. I think they just messed up. But he doesn't want, you're the coach. You don't want to like sell out your players too bad and say like, yeah, one guy ran the wrong pattern. It didn't look right though. But either way, it was a bad decision by Brock Purdy, even though the wide receivers were not running good routes. He shouldn't have thrown the ball to either one of them. And instead, he threw it directly to Logan Wilson. So the Bengals got the ball back. And first play, they made the 49ers pay. They threw a fake bubble screen to Tyler Boyd. They had Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd split out wide. And since they picked it off in the 49ers territory, they're at the 17-yard line. They had been running these screens to Jamar Chase throughout the game, and the 49ers defenders had been very aggressive at coming up and making the tackle or trying to make the tackle, even though Jamar Chase was breaking out of some of the tackles. They were trying to come up and be aggressive about it. This time, the Bengals faked like Tyler Boyd was going to catch the screen, and Jamar Chase faked like he was going to block, and then ran up into the end zone to catch the touchdown pass from Joe Burrow. It was fortunate that the 49ers defender, Isaiah Oliver, number 26, he kind of hesitated and went like maybe, they're going to throw it to Boyd, and like he was going to go make the tackle. And just that split second slowed him down enough where he didn't catch up to Jamar Chase. It was a perfectly thrown ball, but Jamar Chase was wide open in the end zone. Perfect play call. That was the play where Zac Taylor, he said he didn't take credit for the call. Somebody in the headset said, hey, this would be a really good time for this fake screen to Jamar Chase. He called it. It worked to perfection. So I'm going to say it was Troy Walters. Let's say it was Troy Walters, the wide receiver head coach, that gets all the credit for that touchdown. And then right after this, Jamar Chase, he doesn't do the gritty. He does a standing backflip to celebrate the touchdown. He said he did gymnastics when he was a little kid, but he hasn't done a backflip in a few years at least, and definitely not in a game with pads and a helmet on. So it was very impressive. If I didn't have the helmet and the pads on, I could probably do the standing backflip. I would probably tear both of my Achilles tendons as soon as I landed from said backflip, but I might survive it, but definitely not with the pads and on an NFL stadium right after I scored a touchdown. So amazing play in many ways by Jamar Chase on that one. After the McPherson extra point is good, that makes it 24-10 Bengals with about 13 minutes left to go in the game. One thing real quick on that last sack on Joe Burrow, it looked like it may have been a fumble. It looked like it probably was a fumble, but the referees said the play was dead. Again, blew the whistle. They didn't go back and review it. 49ers didn't challenge it because what happened was they didn't recover the ball. Ted Karras, the Bengals center, ended up coming in and scooping up the fumble. And if they had ruled a fumble, it would have been legal for Karras to advance the ball because it wasn't fourth down. It's not like the fumble-rooski rule where only the fumbling player is allowed to advance it. In this type of a normal out in the middle of the field, like first and second down situation, it's totally legal. And it would have been so cool to see how far Ted Karras could have got because he had at least 20 to 25 yards of open grass, nobody in front of him, and he ran without getting touched up until about the 20-yard line, and then they started blowing the whistle. But he had good ball security, high and tight. He was checking over his shoulders, making sure nobody was going to come up and catch him from behind, and he was moving too. Like Ted Karras, he looked like he could move a little bit for a big guy. It would have been really interesting. I wanted to see Ted Karras like bust out a spin move or try to juke somebody. He probably would have like ripped his groin off. He's so old, he can't be running. But it's just kind of cool when you see like big men finally get the chance to touch the football and run with it. It's kind of fun just to see what they could do. On their next drive, the 49ers offense gets back on track. They go 10 plays, 75 yards for a touchdown to keep the game close, not get blown away. There was a play where Brock Purdy, the 49ers quarterback, number 13, he avoided the rush from number 27, Jordan Battle, the Bengals free safety. He's a rookie, third-round pick. He's been subbing in and out with Nick Scott, and unfortunately, he's not able to get even a hand on Brock Purdy in this, but he was able to get in on a couple tackles in this game. But Nick Scott and Jordan Battle have been subbing in and out. Neither one has made a interception so far this year, not had a big impact. So we're gonna have to see like either one of them. If one of them could just make any kind of a play, they would probably win the starting job. On this drive, we saw a lot of Christian McCaffrey for the 49ers, their running back number 23. We saw a lot of Brandon Ayuk, number 11, the wide receiver, catching passes. And we saw George Kittle drop an easy pass over the middle on first down. But the next play, Brock Purdy scrambled around. He looked very similar to Joe Burrow or somebody like that, where he was running around, avoiding the pressure in the pocket. He scrambled out to the right and then threw across his body late over the middle of the field, which is usually a huge mistake. Your coaches would tell you never throw late over the middle across your body. But in this particular instance, George Kittle was standing there wide open. He just kind of found the soft spot in the zone where the Bengals had vacated, and Brock Purdy was able to get it there before anyone could break up the pass. So kind of breaking one of those rules, cardinal sins you never want to do, but it worked out for the 49ers in this drive. He actually did it again. Brock Purdy actually made a very similar play for a touchdown to end this drive where he was kind of scrambling around and then threw over the middle across his body to Christian McCaffrey in the end zone for the touchdown. That made it 24-17 Bengals with about 8 minutes left to go in the fourth quarter. And this is where you got to have a good drive to close out the game if you're the Bengals offense. They had many opportunities in other games that they had won, like the Rams and the Seahawks, to put the teams away, but they couldn't come through, and they had to depend on the defense to make a stop to win the game for them. It wasn't the offense making the play. In this game, it was the opposite. The Bengals offense took control when they needed to, had a long drive to close out the game, 10 plays, 78 yards, almost 5.5 minutes off the clock. Some of the big plays in this game, they had 2 plays right off the bat to Trenton Irwin, number 16, the wide receiver. 1 for 3, but then a big one for 21 yards up the right side of the field where he just caught it and ran for about 10 extra yards after the catch. They tried to break out a Jamar Chase end around where Jamar Chase lined up close on the right wing, and then at the snap, he ran across to the left, took the handoff from Joe Burrow around for a sweep around the left side. But Irv Smith was the lead blocker, and he got blocked back into Jamar Chase. He had to run around Irv Smith to get outside. And then by the time he got outside, Isaiah Oliver was there, the safety or the nickel cornerback for the 49ers, number 26. He came up and made a good open field tackle on Jamar Chase. It's kind of surprising whenever you see Jamar Chase get tackled by one guy. We expect Jamar Chase to just be like this Superman, break every tackle. But there's been a couple times where Jamar Chase had the ball out in the open field, one-on-one with a guy, and he wasn't able to break through. He got no gain on this play. But on the next play, probably Joe Burrow's best pass overall of the day. It was basically a deep out route to Jamar Chase, but it was into double coverage again. But this was 20 yards on the sideline, perfect pass by Joe Burrow, timing, good blocking by the offensive line, but perfect pass placement right on the sidelines where only Jamar Chase had a chance to get it. He had to drop it over the cornerback who was playing Jamar underneath and in front of the safety who was playing over the top. They were basically sandwiching Jamar Chase, but Burrow put it in the perfect position where only Jamar could catch it. Jamar Chase caught it right on the sideline and dragged his back foot to get 2 feet inbounds. Perfect catch, perfect route, perfect throw, perfect call into that defense by the coaches, knowing that even though they're going to get a double team, they ran a good route combination that worked well into that defense. So good call by everybody, good execution by the Bengals. Later in this drive, we saw another Joe Burrow scramble for about 10 yards, called his own number again. We haven't been seeing that in any previous games. Joe Burrow has been avoiding scrambling at all costs. He's been trying to dump it down. He's like, here, Travion Williams, please take the ball. I would rather you have it than me, a supreme athlete like Joe Burrow. But no more Travion Williams. I don't even know if he touched the ball except for the kickoff. But Joe Burrow was keeping it himself. He was running, getting up again, slapping himself in the helmet, getting pumped up. Yeah, first down, fourth quarter, let's go. We're winning this game on my back. That's what Joe Burrow's saying. And then they had it on about the 49ers 20-yard line. They got a 9-yard run from Joe Mixon where he did, as soon as he got the handoff, did a jump cut and went out to the left around the left edge, broke out of the tackle of Nick Bosa and got around before he was brought down for about 9 yards. Then 2nd and goal from the 5, very similar play where the 49ers all sold out to block up the middle of the field, middle of the defense. Joe Mixon took the handoff, jump cut out around Nick Bosa to the left end. Nobody was there to stop him around the left. That lets Joe Mixon score what would be the Bengals' go-ahead touchdown, kick the extra point. That makes it 31-17 Bengals with 3 minutes left to go in the game. 14-point lead and 3 minutes left to go. You feel much more comfortable with this lead than, say, the lead we had against the Seahawks or one of those type of games. The Bengals come out in their typical bend but don't break kind of prevent defense. I was getting a little bit nervous because they gave up 3 passes in a row to George Kittle over the middle, where it was 14 yards, 8 yards, and 18 yards, all to George Kittle. It's like, hey, Bengals, like maybe you want to guard number 85 a little bit here. I know it's like prevent defense, but they're throwing it to the same guy every play. Maybe let's prevent on 85 a little bit more. But the Bengals were able to get a sack on Brock Purdy on the next play by Sam Hubbard. Then on 2nd and 16, it looked like the Bengals had another interception, 3rd interception of the day by Mike Hilton cutting in front, but it was called roughing the passer on DJ Reader, where they said he launched out into Brock Purdy's knees and hit him below the knees in the lower body. And you can't do that if the quarterback is throwing, then they want to protect the quarterback and can't hit him low like that and take out the legs. It was kind of a close call. It looked like maybe he initiated the contact up around his thighs and slid down below his knees. But when it's kind of close, they're going to call it in favor of roughing the passer. So it saved them from the interception. But on the next play, it was a turnover where Trey Hendrickson finally beat the left tackle Moore around the end and caused a strip sack. So Hendrickson had not had a sack all day up until the last 2 minutes of the game. He comes in, closes out the game, strip sack fumble, recovered by the Bengals, number 92, B.J. Hill. All the Bengals have to do pretty much is run out the clock after that and win the game. And that ended up being the final score. Bengals 31, 49ers 17. Bengals improve to 4-3 and get above 500 record and win their 3rd game in a row. 49ers lose their 3rd game in a row and go to 5-3 as they go into their bye week. Next week, the Bengals are going to have the Buffalo Bills at home on Sunday Night Football. This was a big matchup against an NFC opponent, and this was actually the Bengals swept the NFC West division. This was their 4th game against an NFC West opponent, and they were 4-0. They beat the Rams, the Seahawks, the Cardinals, and now the 49ers. And that's all 4 of the Bengals wins have come against the NFC. And they're in the AFC. So they need to beat some AFC opponents, especially in the AFC North, so that they can get into the AFC playoffs. It's great to beat all the NFC teams, but you need to start beating some AFC teams here just for playoff positioning. Looking at the team statistics, the 49ers outgained the Bengals 460 yards to 400, but a lot of the 49ers yardage was at the end of the first and second half, where they weren't really, it was just kind of garbage time, garbage yardage. So like 80 or 90 of the 49ers yards were not really real yards. I wouldn't really count them, but either way, it was a lot of yards, a lot of offense in this game compared to how good we thought these defenses were going to be. Bengals had 29 first downs to the 49ers 24. Bengals had 17 passing first downs, 10 rushing first downs, 2 off of penalties. 49ers had 15 passing, 8 rushing, 1 off of penalties. Kind of surprising that the 49ers weren't able to run the ball more efficiently. But one thing to note in terms of the penalties, the Bengals only had 1 penalty. It was that roughing the passer penalty late in the game on DJ Reader. If that had not been called a penalty, Bengals would have had 0 penalties the entire game. They almost made it the entire game. I don't know if they've ever done that in a game, but 1 penalty, that's very good discipline by the Bengals players and coaches and everybody not making any stupid mistakes. 49ers didn't do a terrible job of penalties, but they did have 5 for 54, so definitely an advantage for the Bengals. In terms of passing, 49ers had more yards overall, but Joe Burrow had 28 of 32 passes completed. That was about 88%. That's second most in Bengals history. The highest in a game was Ken Anderson, completed 91% of his passes in a game. But still, second most in the history of the Bengals, which is over 50 years, is pretty impressive. He also had 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, 3 sacks for 17 yards, but they also credited Joe Burrow with 43 rushing yards on 6 carries. Not quite as many as Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy ended up with 57 rushing yards on 6 carries, but both quarterbacks were doing a pretty good job of picking up yards with their legs, scrambling outside the pocket, and neither one of them slid. I don't think I remember either quarterback sliding. We did see Brock Purdy on that roughing the passer play hit the back of his helmet on the field when he came down, and they asked him how he felt after the game, if he had any kind of concussion symptoms, dizziness, anything like that. He said, "No, it's fine, just your typical whiplash." And he was like, the head's just like any part of the body. You hit it and you just shake it off and you're fine. I don't know if I would say that, but luckily Brock Purdy made it through without any other symptoms. If you want to look at the quarterback ratings, the QBR, Joe Burrow had an 89.3 QBR to a Brock Purdy 58.2. Joe Burrow's passer rating was 134.8 to Brock Purdy's 94. So Brock Purdy had the 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions, 2 sacks, and a fumble. He could have had, either way, it was a turnover with either the 3rd interception or the next play, strip, sack, fumble on Brock Purdy. Not a terrible game for Brock Purdy. And they asked Fred Warner, the linebacker for the 49ers after the game, does he still have confidence in Brock Purdy? Which seems like a ridiculous question. I know Brock Purdy hasn't been in the league that long, but he's been so successful as their starting quarterback. It seems ridiculous to ask whether or not you still have confidence in the starting quarterback. So Fred Warner just kind of looked at him and was like, do you expect me to say no, honestly? What do you expect? But Kyle Shanahan, he said they have all the faith in Brock Purdy. He's the whole reason they were even in the game to begin with, was because he was throwing the ball all over the place, making amazing runs with his feet. Yeah, he did make some bad decisions, and you could even see on Shanahan's face during the game, he was completely disgusted with Brock Purdy, oh my God, I can't believe you threw that interception. But he doesn't, I don't know if the reporters are just trying to, I guess that's what you do. You try to drum up controversy and say, oh, well, maybe Brock Purdy isn't that good. He's got a concussion. We should sit him and put in Sam Darnold or something. Who knows? But they're not going to sit Brock Purdy. He's the starting quarterback. In terms of the running game, Bengals were actually better than the 49ers, which is surprising. Bengals were the worst running team in the NFL coming into this game. 49ers, one of the best running teams. Joe Mixon had 87 yards on 16 carries with 1 touchdown, long of 20, average of 5.4 yards per carry for Joe Mixon. So one of the best games Joe Mixon has had, even though he didn't get to 100 yards. That's still pretty good for only having 16 carries. The other reason was because Joe Burrow was picking up yards with his legs. He got 43 on 6, like I said, average of 7.2 yards per carry for Joe Burrow and a long of 20. That totaled up 134 yards to the 49ers, 113. Brock Purdy was actually the leading rusher for the 49ers. He had 57 yards on 6 carries, average of 9.5 per carry, long of 16. Christian McCaffrey had 54 yards on 12 carries, average of 4.5 per carry, 1 touchdown, long of 16. Christian McCaffrey also added 64 yards of receiving on 6 catches and another touchdown. The leading receiver in the game ended up being George Kittle. He had 149 yards, 9 catches on 11 targets, long of 34. The Bengals' top receiver was Jamar Chase. He had 10 catches on 12 targets, 100 yards, and 1 touchdown, so an average of 10 yards per catch, long of 20. T. Higgins also got involved, 5 catches on 6 targets, 69 yards, no touchdowns, long of 33 for T. And it was good to see T with the 5 catches on 6 targets being more productive. That's what we need. Somebody else besides just Jamar Chase stepping up and doing everything. Tyler Boyd also caught 3 of 3 for 40 yards and a touchdown. Irv Smith, at least he got a little bit involved in the game as a tight end. He caught 4 passes for 25 yards, 2 11-yard catches, and then a couple other short ones. And the fumble, not good, but at least, getting him involved. We'll have to see if that's what they decide to do going forward, or if they decide maybe a little bit more Mitch Wilcox or Drew Sample or somebody else. They did not decide to do anything at the trade deadline. Bengals are never going to do anything cool like that and trade for anybody. It's going to be Irv Smith Jr. till the wheels fall off. We also saw Trenton Irwin make a couple big catches, including that 21-yarder. Joe Mixon got involved. And also, of course, Andre Iosivas, wide receiver from Princeton, with the 2-yard touchdown catch and the nice dance. For the 49ers, they also had another 100-yard receiver in Brandon Ayuk. He had 109 yards, 5 catches on 9 targets, no touchdowns. Not quite as efficient. He had like the one that bounced off his face, a couple that he maybe could have caught but didn't. But still, Bengals gave up 100 yards receiving to 2 different receivers. The linebackers and safeties like Nick Scott, Dax Hill, Jermaine Pratt, Logan Wilson, they were giving up a lot of yards over the middle to Kittle and Ayuk. That's going to be one thing they're going to have to clean up a little bit. That said, Logan Wilson had another overall solid game, 11 total tackles, 9 solo. He led the team. He also had 2 pass deflections. Sam Hubbard, 6 total tackles, 4 solo, 1 sack, 2 quarterback hits. So Sam Hubbard, number 2 on the team in tackles. That's what you like to see. You want to see your defensive linemen and your linebackers leading the team in tackles. Cam Taylor-Britt was also in there with 6. Dax Hill had 5 tackles. Jermaine Pratt, 5 tackles. Mike Hilton in there getting his nose in the run game and in the passing game. Overall, the Bengals had 2 sacks, 4 passes deflected, and 7 quarterback hits. So the defensive line was pretty good at getting pressure on Brock Purdy, but the athleticism of Brock Purdy was sometimes too much, and he was able to pick up a lot of yards on the ground. For the 49ers, it was interesting. Their leading tackler was actually Hufanga, the safety. You didn't hear his name being called a lot on the broadcast, but he was making a lot of tackles down the field. Also, the other safety, Isaiah Oliver, had 10 tackles, and their middle linebacker, Fred Warner, also had 10 tackles and a quarterback hit. The 49ers did hit Joe Burrow 8 times and got 3 sacks, but the Bengals offense was able to overcome it by just being so efficient on first and second downs. Most of the time, I mean, I guess the sacks, they did stop the drives, forced punts and field goals, but not so many sacks that it just killed the Bengals offense. Special teams game, we did see a good return out of Travion. He got that 41-yarder. Almost got it to midfield, so good play. He had an average of 26.5 yards per return on his 2. Punt return game, not too much from either team. Kicking, Evan McPherson 1 for 2. He missed that long 50-yarder into the wind, but he did make a nice 56-yard field goal. So Jake Mooney only made 1 field goal from, I'm not going to give him really any credit for that. Evan McPherson was also 4 for 4 on his extra points. Monty Mack coming through. Punting game, Brad Robbins, the other punter had like 2 punts that were 60 yards, and Brad Robbins were like at the longest 49 yards. He had a touchback and no punts. Brad Robbins had 1 touchback, no punts inside the 20 on 3 punts. The other punter, Wisnowski, had 3 punts, 2 inside the 20, no touchbacks, and his average was like 5 yards longer than Brad Robbins. So Brad Robbins still is getting out-punted on a consistent basis, but he's getting a little bit better. It's slowly improving. It's a process. Hopefully it continues, and maybe he can get a little bit more distance on some of these kicks. But that's just me being like hypercritical. I'd say overall it was a great team win, one of the biggest wins in front of a big audience. Like I said, it was the Jim Nantz, Tony Romo spotlight game of the week. The game in Sunday night was like, was it Bears versus Chargers? Like nobody cares about that matchup. Everybody was looking at Bengals versus 49ers. This is the one everybody had circled on the calendar. And when you looked at the recap shows of all these other shows on YouTube and wherever else, they all had Joe Burrow on the thumbnail. Like this was the game everybody was talking about. This has really put a stamp on the fact that Joe Burrow is back for real and the NFL is on notice. Now, that being said, they're going to have a tough challenge again this week. They're not going to have any more bye weeks. They're not going to be as fresh as they have been. They're going to have 10 more games, a tough schedule, and it's going to be a tough opponent every single week. So they're going to have to grind it out, get some more wins. It's not going to be easy, but if Joe Burrow can stay healthy, Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon and everybody that they need can stay healthy throughout the season, things are looking up. That's going to do it for this episode of Bengal Bites. Join us next time where we do episode 20, the Week 9 preview episode, Sunday night against the Buffalo Bills. If you've listened this far into the show, don't forget to subscribe, give me a rating, all that stuff, trying to grow the show organically. But until next time, I'm going to leave you with a hoo-day and stay hungry for more Bengal Bites.